Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Graham was sitting in the living room of the three-story mansion in Charleston, his fingers nervously tapping the brown envelope the private investigator had delivered less than an hour ago. The golden light of late afternoon streamed through the colonial windows, illuminating the photos scattered across the mahogany coffee table, images that shattered 18 years of marriage in frozen seconds of time. Vanessa hugging a younger man. Vanessa laughing at a seaside restaurant. Vanessa entering a boutique hotel in the historic district. Vanessa kissing that same man next to a red sports car. Each photograph was a stab to the gut, but Graham didn't look away. He needed to see it all, absorb every detail, understand the full extent of the betrayal before he acted. And he would act today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Just 3 days earlier, Graham's life had seemed perfect. At 50 years old, he was one of South Carolina's most successful real estate brokers, with an impeccable reputation built over 25 years in the business. He knew every street in Charleston, every historic property, every potential buyer who dreamed of living in that charming city with its colorful houses and cobblestone streets. Graham loved his work, but he loved coming home even more, to find Vanessa, his 45-year-old wife, the former model he'd met at a charity gala when she was only 27. She was stunning, blonde hair always flawless, a body sculpted by Pilates and yoga, a smile that lit up any room. Graham had felt like the luckiest man in the world when she agreed to marry him. They never had children. At first, it was a choice. They were both focused on their careers, enjoying the freedom to travel whenever they wanted, to be spontaneous. Later, when they tried, it didn't happen naturally, and Vanessa refused fertility treatments. Graham accepted it. After all, they had each other. Or so he thought. He compensated for the lack of children by spoiling Vanessa in every possible way. 5 years ago, when she mentioned her dream of opening her own clothing boutique, Graham didn't hesitate. He bought a charming storefront on King Street, the most fashionable street in Charleston, completely renovated it, and presented the finished shop to Vanessa on her 40th birthday. Everything was documented, the property, the renovation, the initial inventory. It was his gift to her, an investment in her dream. But in the past 6 months, something had changed. Vanessa had grown distant, cold as the marble statues decorating the mansion's garden. Her criticism started subtly and then escalated. "Graham, you're getting too old for those clothes," she'd say when she saw him in jeans and a polo shirt. "You have no energy for anything, you just want to stay home. How boring, always the same conversations about real estate and sales." When he suggested a romantic dinner, she claimed exhaustion. When he planned a weekend getaway, she had unmovable commitments at the boutique. Nights out with friends became frequent. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, Vanessa would leave the house elegantly dressed, perfumed, and return late, always with ready-made excuses about networking cocktails or fashion events. Graham, immersed in closing million-dollar deals and meetings with investors, didn't question her. He trusted her. Completely. Until last Sunday, when everything collapsed. Michael, his friend since college, asked to meet at a cafe in the historic district. Michael looked uneasy, fiddling with his coffee cup without drinking, avoiding Graham's eyes. "Man, I didn't want to have to do this," Michael began, his voice low and tense. "But if it were me, I'd want to know." He slid his phone across the table, showing photos. Graham's stomach turned. Vanessa at Fleet Landing, one of the city's most upscale restaurants, sitting intimately close to a man Graham didn't immediately recognize. They were laughing, she was touching his arm, there was a familiarity that went far beyond friendship. In another photo, they were holding hands, walking along the boardwalk. And in the last one, a kiss, a long, passionate, shameless kiss. "Who is he?" Graham asked, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Michael sighed. "Troy Beckham. Owner of that CrossFit gym on Meeting Street, Troy Cross Fitness. I recognized him because my nephew trains there. I saw them together Thursday night and thought it was weird, so I kept watching. Sorry, Graham, but I needed to be sure before telling you. Graham felt his blood boil, a mix of humiliation, rage, and disbelief. But he wouldn't explode there, in the cafe, in front of his friend. He thanked Michael, saved the forwarded photos to his phone, and walked out with a cold determination burning in his chest. He needed concrete proof, not just photos from a friend. He needed irrefutable evidence before confronting Vanessa. That same Sunday afternoon, Graham called a private investigator a client had recommended years ago during a complicated divorce. The investigator, a former cop named Rick, answered even though it was the weekend. Graham explained the situation, sent Michael's photos, and offered double the usual rate for results within 48 hours. I'll pay whatever it takes, but I need everything, photos, videos, records, everything, by Tuesday afternoon. Rick agreed. Graham spent Monday and Tuesday on autopilot, showing properties to clients, closing contracts, smiling professionally while his inner world crumbled. Vanessa kept up her routine. She left Monday night for a meeting with suppliers, and Tuesday afternoon for a collection launch event. Each lie was another wound. On Tuesday at 5 p.m., Rick showed up at Graham's office with the brown envelope. The dossier was devastating and meticulous. Time-stamped photos showed Vanessa and Troy entering the Charleston Harbor Resort together 3 times in the past week, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always between 7 and 10 at night. There were discreetly recorded videos showing the two at romantic dinners, sharing desserts, laughing, kissing in dark corners of expensive restaurants. Rick had also investigated Troy and included a basic financial report. Graham read with growing disbelief. Troy Beckham, 35, owner of Troycross Fitness, was bankrupt. 3 commercial mortgages in arrears, lawsuits from creditors, the bank initiating foreclosure on the gym. The man was drowning in debt. And suddenly, it all made sense. Vanessa wasn't just betraying Graham emotionally, she was bankrolling her lover. Graham reviewed their joint bank statements from recent months with fresh eyes. Money transferred from her account to accounts he didn't recognize. Payments at restaurants he'd never visited. Purchases at men's athletic stores, expensive running shoes, branded workout clothes, supplements. Vanessa was using Graham's hard-earned money to support Troy while his gym sank. Graham's anger turned into something colder, more calculated. He wouldn't just confront Vanessa, he would methodically dismantle everything. Graham returned home at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday and set the scene. He spread the photos across the coffee table in the living room, placed the investigator's full dossier beside them, and marked the bank statements with a red pen highlighting the suspicious expenses. Then he sat in the leather armchair facing the door and waited. Vanessa arrived at 7:15, coming in through the garage as usual, tossing her designer handbag onto the hallway console. "Graham? Are you home? I thought you had dinner with that Kiowa Island client tonight," she called, her voice echoing through the house. He didn't respond. Vanessa walked into the living room and froze. Her eyes swept over the photos on the table, then lifted to meet Graham's icy stare. What is this?" she stammered, her face paling. Graham leaned forward slowly, picking up one of the most explicit photos, Vanessa and Troy kissing in front of the hotel. "This," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "is the end of our marriage. Sit down." Vanessa didn't move, her eyes wide. "Graham, I can explain," he let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Explain? Are you going to explain how you and your muscular personal trainer have been meeting 3 times a week for months? Are you going to explain the $12,000 you transferred from our account to his over the past 4 months? Are you going to explain why you spent my money buying clothes, dinners, and gifts for your lover while calling me boring and old at home?" Vanessa tried another approach, tears beginning to fall, tears Graham recognized as fake, staged. "It was a mistake, Graham. I was confused, feeling invisible. You're always working." He raised a hand, cutting her off. No. Don't try to blame this on me. I worked to give you everything you wanted. This house. That boutique on King Street you love so much. The trips. The jewelry. Everything. And you betrayed me with a broke guy who's using you as his personal bank. Vanessa wiped her tears, and then something shifted in her expression. The mask fell. The false vulnerability gave way to anger, to resentment she'd been hiding. Every day with you was nothing but regret, Graham, she shouted, her voice sharp and echoing off the walls. I wanted to end this nightmare of a marriage. You're boring. Predictable. Old. Troy makes me feel alive, desired, young again. He sees me, Graham. You just see me as another trophy in your collection. The silence that followed was deafening. Graham looked at the woman he'd shared 18 years of his life with and no longer recognized her. He stood slowly, picked up a separate envelope from the table, not the investigator's dossier, but a smaller one. It's interesting you mentioned Troy making you feel special, Graham said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Because I have something you might not know about your Prince Charming. He opened the envelope and pulled out financial documents. Troy Beckham is bankrupt, Vanessa. Completely broke. His gym is in foreclosure. He has 3 delinquent commercial mortgages and over $200,000 in debt. And here's the funniest part, I sold him 2 properties 3 years ago. I know his financial situation better than you do. Vanessa stood frozen, all color draining from her face. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice wavered. Graham tossed the documents onto the table beside the photos. Lying? It's all here. Public records, credit reports. Now do you see why he thinks you're so special, Vanessa? You were paying for his dinners, buying him clothes, probably lending him money. He doesn't love you. He loves your wallet. Or rather, my wallet. Vanessa picked up the documents with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the numbers, dates, and delinquency notices. She staggered to the sofa and collapsed, reality crashing over her like an avalanche. But there's more, Graham continued, now pacing the room with his hands in his pockets, completely in control. While you were busy destroying our marriage for a guy who only wanted your money, I've already taken care of a few things. I filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer has already submitted everything. Vanessa jerked her head up. You can't, Graham smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, but I can. And here's the best part, remember the boutique? That beautiful shop on King Street you love so much? I bought that property, Vanessa. With my money. It's all documented. It was a gift, but in the divorce, you'll have to repay my share of the investment. The property's worth $500,000 now. You'll either have to sell it or buy me out. Vanessa stumbled to her feet. You can't do this to me. That store is my life. Graham shrugged. You should have thought of that before using my money to fund your affair. Oh, and about our joint assets, the beach house in Folly Beach? I sold it yesterday. Legally, I could. It was in my name. The money's already in a separate account. Our joint investment portfolio? I've already transferred my share. Everything's completely legal, Vanessa. I've learned a lot in 25 years of selling real estate. Vanessa began to cry for real now, not rehearsed tears, but panicked sobs. Graham, please, we can talk about this, it was a mistake. He picked up his coat from the armchair and walked toward the door. No. We can't. You made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. You can stay in the house tonight, but tomorrow you find somewhere else. And Vanessa? He paused at the door, turning one last time. Next time Troy calls asking for financial help, remember you no longer have access to my money. Let's see how long this great love lasts. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures, but Graham had prepared well. His lawyer was relentless, and with clear evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, Vanessa had few cards to play. The divorce settlement was brutal for her. Graham kept the Charleston mansion and most of the investments, and Vanessa had to sell the boutique to repay his share. The property was valuable, but the business itself was in debt, so what remained after paying Graham and settling debts was little. She moved into a modest apartment in Mount Pleasant, a stark contrast to the luxurious life she'd once known. Troy, as Graham predicted, vanished from Vanessa's life as soon as it became clear she had no money left. The gym closed 3 weeks after the confrontation, seized by the bank. Troy tried calling Vanessa a few times, asking to borrow more money, but she had nothing to give. When she went to the gym in a final desperate attempt to find him, the space was empty, with an eviction notice on the door. Troy had left Charleston without warning, leaving behind debts and broken promises. Vanessa tried to rebuild, landing a job at a department store in the mall, a harsh fall from chic boutique owner to commission-based sales clerk. Her high society friends in Charleston, aware of the scandal, avoided her. Invitations to charity events stopped. Gala nights became distant memories. Graham, on the other hand, found a freedom he hadn't realized he was missing. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, he closed a huge sale on a historic property on the Battery and decided to take a real vacation, something he hadn't done in years. He flew to Europe with no fixed itinerary, just exploring. In Tuscany, during a visit to a family-run vineyard in Montalcino, he met Isabella, a 52-year-old Italian sommelier, a widow with a warm smile and eyes that sparkled when she spoke about wine and life. They talked for hours that sunny afternoon among the vines, sharing stories, genuine laughter, and a connection Graham hadn't felt in years. Isabella didn't care about Graham's money, she had her own life, her own vineyard inherited from her husband. She was interested in Graham as a person, his stories, his love for architecture and history. They spent 2 weeks traveling together through Tuscany, then Umbria, rediscovering the joy of being with someone who truly valued him. When Graham returned to Charleston, they stayed in touch, daily video calls, plans for Isabella to visit him in the U.S. 6 months later. She came and stayed for 3 months. A year after the divorce, Graham sold the Charleston mansion. It was too big, filled with bad memories, and bought a smaller, cozier seaside home. Isabella split her time between Italy and South Carolina, and Graham began spending half the year in Tuscany, working remotely and living a life he'd never imagined possible at 51. Vanessa, bitter and alone, saw Graham's social media updates through mutual acquaintances' profiles. Photos of him smiling in Italian vineyards. Photos of him and Isabella at sunset dinners. Photos from trips to places she and Graham had never visited together. Each image was a painful reminder of what she'd thrown away. She wasn't the money, the mansion, or the social status. It was having someone who truly cared about her, someone who would have given her everything if she'd only valued him. But it was too late. Graham had moved on, found real happiness, and Vanessa was stuck in a mediocre present built on the ruins of her own selfish choices. The lesson echoed silently on that rainy night, taking for granted the person who loves you, using someone as a bank, and then humiliating them can cost you everything, not just material possessions, but the chance at true happiness, self-respect, and the life you once took for granted. Graham found peace not through violent revenge, but simply by walking away, protecting what was his, and opening himself to a future where he was truly valued. Vanessa paid the highest price possible, living with regret, watching from afar the life that could have been hers if she'd made different choices. And that regret, unlike the one she once shouted at Graham, wasn't about being with him. It was about having lost him. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.